Good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I'm Bishop-elect Vanessa and Brown, and I'm your host and moderator for this evening. And certainly, we are doing this show with some help. And so I'm so glad to have my brother here with me, Bishop-elect Troy Sanders. He is the senior pastor of Rehoboth Fellowship of Atlanta. Dear brother, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Reverend Dr. Sister Nessa. Happy first day of March. Happy Women's
Yeah,
History Month. Yes, ma'am.
indeed. It is the first day in March, and I am so glad about it. I am so glad about it.
Absolutely. Getting up
And
out
we,
this winter time.
yes, come on now. But here's the deal: ain't been a lot of snow in New Jersey,
That's what I
in New
hear.
York. And I'm looking at the weather. Do you know that it was snowing in Las Vegas? Like large
Eee.
snowflakes, like snowing in Las Vegas and not snowing in New Jersey and New York. Like really? Like kind of winter just like we had like dusters. Winter
Wow.
just passed us by in terms of that kind of weather, at least for now, right?
That's
So,
it.
I haven't been snowed in, I haven't had to dig out any snow, and I'm grateful.
We
I am
haven't had any in Atlanta, but that's normal for us. So we took
exactly.
it with stride.
Yes, indeed. And so I've want to shout out all of those who want to know where you're watching from. It's important.
Yes.
Tell us where you're watching from. We see you all. And we want to thank Facebook Live. We want to thank not Stream, y'all. We want to thank Facebook Live, YouTube, uh, LinkedIn, Spotify. You can listen on Spotify. All of the places where you can find us at, we are there. And so we want you all to share this particular platform. This is Beyond the Gatekeepers. We are having current events and books and films and all those things through a theological and justice informed lens. And so I see here we have Sean Jenkins from the Metro Atlanta area,
Yes.
Albert Reed, Colleen, Texas, Chuck Hunt, Monroe, Louisiana, St. Louis, Missouri. Far Rockaway is here again. Georgia, McDonough, Georgia. Miko Mo is here with us. Paris, California. Listen, she says it's snowing in Paris, California. Why?
Wow. Wow.
Sandy Hudson, like wow, like climate change. Yes, Rebecca Brown, from Phoenix, Arizona. Pastor Siegfried Benton, Temple Hills, Maryland. Bless you. Portland, Oregon is here with us. Thank you for joining in, and thank you all for sharing, at least with one more person or two more people, right? Karen Coleman, thank you for being here tonight. Boston,
Yes.
Massachusetts. Nessa Wilkinson is here from Maryland. Yes, Tamika Hamlet Davis, cousin
That's
Mika
my
from New
cousin.
Jersey.
Yes. Hey,
I
cuz.
love that. Yes. Kathy Ross says, praise the Lord from Snellfield, Georgia. Love you, Troy. Yes.
Yep, that's my
Anthony
sister. Hey,
Melendez,
Kathy.
yes, from New York City. J. Frederick Bland from Detroit. Lisa from Raleigh, North Carolina. Sherry Brown Jackson from New Orleans. The people are in the room. Come on, y'all. Share with us. This is a great conversation tonight. I'm so grateful for the last couple of weeks. Actually, since we started back this season, for all of the authors and filmmakers who have joined us. And so we are so excited about tonight and about our guest on tonight and about this
Absolutely.
book on tonight. Such a powerful book. And we don't want to delay anymore because I just want to get into this book. We have Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown, PhD, who also is the Distinguished Professor Emerita of Psychology at Agnes Scott College. And we're so grateful for her presence tonight. But even more so, this book, this powerful book, What Makes You Come Alive? A Spiritual Walk with Howard Thurman.
Yes.
Oh, what a powerful, transformative, mystical man of God. And
Yes.
want to let everybody know before we get into it, and we'll say it again, we're going to do a free book giveaway. We're actually going to give away 2 books. We're grateful to Dr. Lerita for saying that. And all you have to do is type hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. All right. Do me a favor. Make sure that you're sharing this conversation before we get into it. And want to say real quick, shout out to Warren and Sherry James for Casa Grande, Arizona. And shout out to Herbert Jones from Boston, Massachusetts. And to Barrington Ross from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. So glad that you are all here. And we're asking that everybody share even those that are on the Beyond the Gatekeepers page. This
Yeah.
promises to be a very, very, very powerful conversation tonight. And so, my first question always is, tell me why you wrote this book.
I think the spirit called me to write this book. There were so many things that happened. I was not intending to write a book about Howard Thurman. However, I felt called to expose him to more people because I began to lead retreats on him and talks and speaking engagements probably sometime in 2016. And every time I presented on him, people kind of rushed the stage and said, "Who is this? I've never heard of him." So after a number of those, I thought, okay, I've got to find a way to expose him to more people. So I was attending a fest. I had been invited to attend the Wild Goose Festival.
We know about the Wild Goose
Wild Goose
Festival. As a matter
Festival.
of fact, Bishop Flunder preaches for them often.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so while I was there, I was giving a couple talks on Howard Thurman, and this woman drove up in a golf cart. She was going to give me a ride into the main stage, and I didn't really need a ride. But she started talking, and she found out I had interest and was giving talks on Howard Thurman. She said, "Well, stay right there." And she goes into the campground, comes back, and hands me an icon painting of him that she had painted and said, "Here, this is for you." And I was like, "Whoa." Right? That seemed like a sort of a sign, because like, what's the probability of that? So I sat it in the house, let it sit there for a while. But during the pandemic, an acquisitions editor out of the blue contacted me and said, "Hey, are you interested in writing a book?" And I said, "Well, not really." But she said, "Well," I said, "But I have this concern about people not knowing about Howard Thurman." She says, "Let's put together a proposal."
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I was writing a book about Howard Thurman. But I really related to his spirituality because it seemed to be connected to my own as a child, especially a person who liked to be outside. And so I thought, here's my opportunity, because I did not learn about him until later in life. And I just thought that was a shame, just a shame.
Such a powerful man, as I said, a mystic in his own right. And you start this book off right. You have 10 chapters here, but you start talking about the icon in the campground. But you start off the book with one of my favorite quotes from Howard Thurman: "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that." Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And we could stay right there all night, because like I just feel like that is really what is going on with people. That's really what is in terms of spirituality, that people have not found out what makes them come alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of people out there uh, engaging in occupations or activities because they want to make money or they want to make a name for themselves, and that gets old after a while.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, and makes you want to feel that joy of having a purpose, I just think it's very difficult. So he was one of these advocates of do what makes you come alive, or
Yeah.
um, uh, listen for the sound of the genuine in you,
Mm-hmm.
or follow the grain of your own wood. He was always trying to get people to find out who they were and not be out there trying to be somebody else.
And I love it because chapter by chapter you break it down, but all rooted in things that Howard Thurman has taught down through the years. Our minds seethe with endless traffic, center down. Can you just say more about that? Like, I know what it's about. I know it's about finding your center, sitting in silence. He talks about all of those things.
Yeah, he felt like silence was very healing, and and in part it's because when we get quiet, when we get still, we sense that divine presence around us. And it's almost like, here we are in 2023, we got all these EVs, these electric vehicles that have to be recharged, right? And so the way for us to be recharged is to be quiet sometimes and just sit in the presence of God. I have a evangelical friend who says it's kind of like sitting on God's lap, just for a little while. Or for me, I tell people prayer is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. But once you have presented your to-do list for God, you might want to take some time to center down and just listen. Just listen from the inside. So he was a strong advocate of somewhere during every day, you need to stop doing so much and just take some time to just sit and feel that sense of joy, that sense of peace, and that sense of joy when you sort of cut out all that external noise and all that chatter that's going on in your mind, and just know that you are sitting in the presence.
It's interesting. I did a visitation on today, and I asked the person what is it that they wanted. They're in hospice care, and I asked them what is it that they wanted most, and they said they wanted peace and quiet. They wanted to just sit in silence, and I knew what that meant. Like, they just want to be able to hear, right? They just want to be able to hear, and I think it's so powerful. I see people are tuning in right now. Thank you all for joining. Don't worry, I see Antonio has joined us. Minister Antonio, Ravi Verma is here with us. Marlene McLaurin from Baltimore. Dr. Stacy May from New York City is here as well. We are so excited that you're here. If you don't know what we're talking about, we're talking about what makes you come alive, a spiritual walk with Howard Thurman. And the great author is here with us of this book, Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown. And so, Bishop-elect Troy, you have something.
So I just wanted to, first of all, Dr. Coleman Brown, say thank you for introducing one of probably the most influential theologians and mystics to me personally, and my ministry to the world again. Like, there's so many themes in this work and in what you are doing that just resonate with me. One, Howard Thurman being a powerful mystic, and the ways in which mysticism and Pentecostalism are twins, particularly from those of us that are of the Pentecostal expression. So I would love for us throughout the night to talk about some of those parallels as well. But also, you mentioned his modality of spirituality. And I think it is so pivotal that Dr. Thurman kind of mirrored for us what deep ecumenicalism looks like, long before ecumenicalism was a thing, right? And I think all of that kind of influences, particularly for me, the way I pastor, the way I engage spirituality. I had to grow into Howard Thurman because I was a Pentecostal boy in the South, me and Nessa, Bishop-elect Nessa. So that ecumenicalism called us, but it also challenged us. And I'm thankful for that. And then the last thing I'll just say is that the ways in which spirituality requires a reawakening. I think you touched on it just a moment ago. Deep, abiding spirituality requires a reawakening. And so many of us have given more time and attention to being woke around social, political issues, but not woke around spirituality and spiritual practices. So I'm excited about the conversation tonight. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for people to actually just stop and ask, what is my spirituality? Do I have a spiritual life? How does that manifest on a daily basis? Because I think oftentimes we're so focused on our health or, what we're eating or whatever, and we forget. I often ask people, because I serve as a spiritual director companion, in my first meeting, I'll ask them, well, so tell me about your spiritual life. And they often will say, you mean the last time I went to church? And I'm like, is that what your spiritual life is? Or I'll ask them about their prayer life. And they'll say, I don't really have time for that, right? So it really is a reawakening. And, Jesus says it out in his conversation with Nicodemus. It's like we must be reborn of the Spirit. That is, we need to understand that our spiritual life is as important as I think it's the most important. That every morning I have to start with that quiet time with God. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. And that we have help, the Spirit is always available for assistance. But we don't utilize our spiritual resources. We have a ton of spiritual resources. And asking for help with whatever issues we might have is one of the ones that people, they think they have to do everything themselves.
That's
But
right.
we're walking around with just amazing spiritual resources that we just don't utilize.
I love that piece, and thank you for that statement and that question, Bishop-elect Troy. But I love the way you just explained that, and not only that, he leans very heavily, and you touch on it too. Like you kind of you don't miss it. You don't miss a beat with this, in terms of discernment.
Yes.
There was we in the Pentecostal church, we talked about the spirit of discernment all the time. But I think it's different, right, in the ways in which Howard Thurman is applying it. And I didn't start really knowing about that until I started doing these seminary junkets with Bishop Flunder and going all over the place, and just kept hearing it in seminary all the time, and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it, and then started applying it in that way. I think in the Pentecostal church, we meant it, and it just in my thinking that, being prophetic, right? You know what I mean? Even though those two words are not the same, I
Right.
think that that's the way that people always took it. But this discernment is more deeper than that. It's an introspection, right? It's a reflection or reflective kind of activity, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is that sometimes we're in the midst of making a major decision, and we need to consult with the Spirit. And if you ask, if you put a question out there, you will get an answer one way or the other. It will show up as an answer. I always tell people, if you want, if you're trying to make a major decision, put that out there and say, I need some help. I need to know what to do in this case. And usually within 40 days and 40 nights, you will get an answer. And that is my lived experience, as you know from reading the book.
Yes.
I've been through some medical stuff, and I swear, without having the Spirit available to ask, I made a major life decision that saved my life, because I went and sat on a rock or a piece of tree up in the Smoky Mountains trying to decide about a job, and the Spirit said no. And 5 years later, I'm talking to a transplant surgeon, and he's saying, I'm glad you're not living on the East Coast. So it was just extraordinary. And so I have continued to, when there's something that is beyond my sort of regular hearing, that is that some kind of major decision about a medical decision or other things, I will in my prayer time say, I need a clear sign here. But oftentimes, if I will just pause, the Spirit will tell me exactly what to do in the moment.
Yeah.
But we just ignore it because we want to do what we want to do.
Because we want to do what we want to do, and we want the answer that we want to have for ourselves, right?
That's right.
It's interesting, right? Because you touch again on so many things, right? You just talked about what you talked about in chapter 3, the signature of God, right? Experiencing nature as the doorway to the divine. And sometimes we just have to get away, right? And it's okay for us to get away. And I think that I was talking to somebody, and they said they hadn't been on a vacation in 12 years. And I'm not talking about coming to a convocation. I'm not talking about I'm talking about like vacation. I mean, like, let your hair down. I mean, like, I'm not taking any business calls. Like, what? The world is going to still be going on when I return, but I'm breaking away from myself.
Yes. And I actually try, I would say at least twice a year, to go on a silent retreat and go off the grid. Tell everybody in my family, all my friends, I am not going to be answering email or phone calls. And it's so amazing to be walking around with an uncluttered mind.
It's interesting. We don't want to unplug.
Well, that's because we've been conditioned to be plugged all the time, right? But there's another life that you can have where you're not plugged in all the time. And I think it's important to take those times because they're restorative. They're restorative, and they often give us great clarity about where we are and where we need to go.
Yes.
So I recommend vacations, retreats,
Yeah.
some time in solitude. And people will say, well, I don't know if I can not talk, or I don't like being by myself. Well, God is with you. God is with you. You're not by yourself.
That's right. That's right. Bishop-elect Troy said, or maybe it was you, one of you two that just talked about the genuine in you. I think it was you, right? Recognizing everyone as a holy child of God. Like this book is full of so many truths, so many things to help us. And I think I just want to recommend it. Like if you are on a journey, if you're seeking, if you need direction, if it's just a knowing that you have, if it's, you know, learning about contemplative, activities, all these things, it's in this book. And I just found it to be a joy. I found it to be uplifting. And I want to talk more about the genuine in you because I think that let me just speak for me. A lot of times people, we are masking, right? We are masking. We are not living our authentic lives. We are not being our authentic selves. We get around one group of people and we're one way. We get around another group of people and we're another way. But the genuine in you, your own voice, not anybody else's voice, your own voice. What is your own voice saying for you to do? You touch on all of this.
Well, Thurman, in probably one of his last public addresses, which was to the 1980 graduating class of Spelman College, gave this baccalaureate address called The Sound of the Genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, there is something in you that waits for the sound of the genuine in yourself. And basically, if you can't hear it, you will always be living your life. You will always be living a life on the designed by somebody else, basically,
Mm-hmm.
holding the strings that someone else holds. So it's like it's so important for you to begin to listen for. So what's genuine for you? That it may be fine for this other person, but and within this baccalaureate address, he talks about singing your own song. He said,
Mhm.
that song over there might be lovely and that person's song might be nice, but what's your song? Sing your own song. And I gave a talk on this the other day, and several people came up to me and said, I've never thought about what is my song? And have I been just living my life following somebody else's song because everybody else was doing it? What is it within me that's calling me? And so he was just so instrumental in helping, particularly as he says, those with their backs against the wall, to try to have an accurate portrayal of who they were, to understand that they were children of God, not whatever anybody else had to say about them. And that when you're be able to clear out some of that, other people's projections on you, pretty much, then you begin to develop some inner freedom. And that gives you the vitality to get out there and do whatever it is that you're called to do. And I tell people, not everybody marched in the civil rights movement, but there were a lot of people doing a lot of different things, right? So what's your call? Even now, I mean, everybody still has a call, right? To as he says, remove the humanly imposed barriers that keep us from our connection with each other. So he was way ahead of his time, of course, but at the same
Indeed.
time, his work, his wisdom is timeless.
Yeah.
It's timeless. Because here
And
it's 41 years, 42 years since he passed away in 1981, and he's still feeding us living wisdom. He's still feeding us living wisdom. And
Yes.
he has so many, he wrote over 20 books. And so, if you're in the contemplative side, then you can read his book of meditations, Meditations of the Heart, or The Inward
Yes.
Journey, or Deep is the Hunger. if you're, a heady intellectual type and you want to get deep into the mysticism, then you can read The Creative Encounter, or The Search for Common Ground, or Disciplines of the Spirit. If you just want to know about him, more about him and his life, read his autobiography, With Head and Heart, the autobiography of Howard Thurman. So there's lots of resources. There's also a film on YouTube, Backs Against the Wall, the Howard Thurman story, which you can just, it's like a PBS 60-minute type of thing that you can just watch as a basic introduction. But what I realized that the Spirit was calling me to do was two things with this book. One is to write something for spiritual seekers, not academics, not some other audience, but people who are really walking around, almost wandering in the desert, right? Trying to understand, why am I here and what am I supposed to be doing, right? So spiritual seekers, that's, that audience. And two, to make sure that people understand that the Spirit is always available, always trying to guide you. And so let it. People don't want to surrender control. And I just think that we could get rid of a lot of needless suffering if people understood that no matter where they go or what they're doing, they have a guide. The guide is with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Bishop Electroy?
One of the things that that you raised that I think that we're all talking about now, I think is so important. Dr. Thurman seems to lift up the concept of recognizing the voice of the genuine with your divine call, like it's equivalent for him.
Yes.
Right. So you cannot answer your divine call around your purpose of existence without connecting and contacting that genuine self. Yes. And I think that is so, it bears almost on its face, right, the connotation that many of us are operating from a disingenuous self.
That's right.
And how many of us in ministry have taken on the responsibilities of ministry, but have not connected with the genuineness of ministry.
We're somebody else, and we're somebody else. We are somebody else.
And we become someone else in the pulpit versus the pulpit being an extension of our true selves. Absolutely.
And the people in the audience can tell, at least I can. I know when I'm in the presence of someone who is living out their call, and they're not doing it for any other reasons, but they've been called, right? And they're in touch. They have a personal relation. I have actually sat with people in spiritual direction, people in the ministry who don't have a personal relationship with God. They're not having that connecting, quiet time with God on a daily basis. And perhaps maybe they thought they were called, or I had someone recently talk about they wanted to be great. And I said, well, but is the Spirit calling you to be great? Or is the Spirit calling you to a particular call that you may turn out to be great, but that's not the motivation? Because then that gets into ego, right? And there's always that tension between, ego and listening to your ego and listening to the Spirit. We have a choice. And I think what I found, at least in my lived experience, is that the more that I listen to the Spirit, the more alive I am, the more peace I feel, the more joy I feel. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments, of course, as we all do. But it's just a different kind of life.
Dr. Lerita, I want to say to the people now, this is a conversation that I just feel like leadership should be like all into this conversation, right? Pastors, clergy, people that are involved in any kind of interaction with other people, leading other people in any kind of way, really should be connected to this conversation. So I'm going to ask people to share this conversation, in YouTube, in Facebook, and all the social media places we are. Share this conversation, right? Because you go on, again, I say 10 great chapters, and you talk about the sacred synchronicity, pay attention to divine intervention.
Yes.
I was blown away by that chapter.
It's amazing because these chapters sort of came to me over a period of time. I would do a retreat, and I was really responding to sometimes the questions that people would ask. So I knew I needed a chapter on silence, and I definitely needed a chapter on nature. And it became evident that I needed to talk about, that self that God created, so that holy child of Godness. But I kept seeing these connections in Thurman's life. And it happened to me where, somebody shows up. There's this man that shows up at the train station when he's trying to leave for the Florida Baptist Academy to help pay his ticket, right?
Yes.
Or he's, trying to figure out how he can get his room and board, and he looks up and he sees the house of Procter and Gamble, the Gamble person, right? But he doesn't know how to contact them. And then he goes to lunch and comes back, and some woman says, "Hey, I want you to take this mail to the post office." And one of the letters was to Gamble, right? So he gets the address. So there are these moments throughout his life where, was that an accident or what? So, and probably one of the biggest ones was that Thurman lost his first wife to tuberculosis. She worked in a Black branch here in Atlanta. But his second wife, Sue Bailey Thurman, and Alberta King were roommates in high school. It's like it's almost as if, was Spirit trying to orchestrate this long before there was a Martin Luther King? I thought of a Martin Luther King Jr. See, so I think God is always on the side of justice, but we just have got to allow the Spirit to come in. And that's sort of what I talk about in some of the latter chapters. We've got to allow Spirit to come in and guide us, because I think we get much further along when there's that connection to Spirit than if we're trying to do it all ourselves.
You are on point, and I want to talk about that. But before, I want you to, can you explain more about the very heart of God? Discover the genius and the religion of Jesus. That was loaded.
Yes. Thurman used to say that he talked with Jesus but prayed to God. But he had a very intimate relationship, and he really scrutinized the Gospels closely. And he felt like that Jesus was a genius, obviously, but in a special way. That when he spoke to his people, and he was not necessarily speaking to the aristocracy, right? He was speaking to regular, everyday people. And he was trying to help them to understand that they had this sacred sanctuary in them, and that they really needed to protect it, but they also needed to be aware of their inner life and who was in control of that. So there's that part, right? But there's also the part of, he talks about, he's got a whole book on the temptation of Jesus, which is about Jesus going into the desert, and sort of what was really going on there. But the idea was that he felt like he was a follower of the religion of Jesus, because Jesus was just giving us a role model for how we should be if we want to claim to be a Christian. And that his kind of religion transcended Christianity. It was something that we're all called to do in terms of how we treat people, how we relate to each other. So he felt like that if you read the Gospels in a particular way, you see that Jesus belonged to a minority group, just like Black folks here, and that he was mistreated or could be mistreated because he was a poor Jew. So those parallels are the things that set him up to write the book, Jesus and the Disinherited, which, of course, became the spiritual blueprint for the civil rights movement. It stirred a lot of people to get out there and start engaging in what they call nonviolent direct action. But let us be clear, Thurman was talking about Jesus, and some of this came out of his study of the spirituals. So he has a book on the spirituals, right? But he started talking about that in the late 20s, early 30s. and particularly as Jesus as a leader of a nonviolent religion. And so, and then, mid-30s, he goes to India on a pilgrimage and spends 6 months. And, towards the end of that, has a meeting with Gandhi. And, they continue to talk about nonviolence and non-cooperation. And Gandhi really sort of saw nonviolence as more like love, of the great universal force of love, as opposed to sort of nonviolence. But Gandhi encouraged them to start with small and to work themselves up to something bigger. But he really felt like this idea of nonviolence and non-cooperation would find its manifestation in the lives of Black folks in the United States. And so he comes back and he's writing and, just very excited about spending more time with this particular issue.
It's interesting because if he was saying this in the 1920s and 1930s, MLK was walking around with that book in his back pocket every place he went.
Yes.
He didn't go anywhere without that book, Jesus and the Disinherited.
Yes. He had it whenever he marched.
He had him with him whenever he marched, indeed.
And what's really remarkable is that when the Thurmans got back from India in 1936, one of the first stops that they made was with the Kings. They were friends. Families were friends. And, they had dinner with them. And who knows? We don't know if Martin was there. He would have been about 7 years old at the time.
Right.
And then the other course connection is when, King was stabbed in 1958. And Thurman started having visions of him, just over and over. He says, I got to go talk to him. And that's when he said, he found him in Harlem and he said, you know what? This thing that you've created has taken on a life of its own. And if I were you, I would take some time for some solitude and silence so that you are clear about what your role is going to be in this. And they say it's the only time he took any time off.
Troy?
No. I just think that it's I'm just blown away by hearing pieces of his story that I just did not know. Right? It's always a learning experience. I wonder also for us, what are the voices that kind of call us to distraction versus the voices that call us to clarity and genuineness, right? So if we could talk a little bit about that as we, delve into this, the voices of distraction versus the voices of clarity.
Well, clearly, we could start with social media.
Yes.
As a major distraction, right? So that, we get kind of revved up watching it and flipping through things. And by the time you want to listen for that sound of the genuine, your mind's all over the place. Or we have some family member who comes in and says, so when are you going to do something with your life? Or, they makes that one of those kind of comments, right? And again, sometimes it's very hard within particular families to be your genuine self because people often have expectations for you. And those can be distracting, right? So there are things that are happening in our own environments, communities, et cetera. There's also that sense that many people have once they sort of finish high school or college, they got to go out and save the world. Well, I'm not sure if the Spirit wants us to save the world. I think the Spirit has a particular role for us. And if we continue to pay attention to those things that we're drawn to, that feel right. See, we actually have that what I want to call it, muscle of knowingness, right? We just don't exercise it enough. So what will happen is, you may be interacting with somebody, or you may have somebody prepared to do some work, and you get that feeling like, maybe not, right? But then we override it. We override it with, oh, well, maybe it'll be okay. Or, I don't want to embarrass myself and tell them no, or whatever it happens to be for you, right? I was brought up to be nice, right? So you don't want to mess up the being nice part, right? Well, as I said, I was going to write a blog called "Being Nice Might Get You Killed," right? But the point is that we already know what we should do, but we often will not. We will not do it. And so that sound of the genuine is always there. But one of the things that Thurman says in that line is there is that, or there is something in us that waits. And in one line he says, and waits.
And waits.
And waits for the sound of the genuine. Well, who's waiting these days? Mm-hmm. Everybody's in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Everybody's going. Yes. Everybody's going.
Yes.
This is something you say. Well, this is right from Howard Thurman's The Inward Journey. There is the rest of detachment and withdrawal when the spirit moves into the depths of the region of the great silence. Here, the presence of God is sensed as an all-pervasive aliveness which materializes into the concreteness of communion, the reality of prayer. Here, God speaks without words, and the self listens without ears. Here, at last, glimpses of the meaning of all things and the meaning of one's own life are seen with all their strivings. And this is taken from the chapter in your book, The Meaning of All Things, Embrace Mysticism for Compassionate Social Action.
People have direct experiences of God, and you can call it mysticism, or as Thurman tried to destigmatize that term and call them creative encounters or religious experience. I think most people have them, but many people are afraid to talk about them. But there are those moments. Maybe it's, sometimes I think it's in those liminal spaces, where you're just waking up from a nap, or you're just waking up in the morning where you have this moment. Because, people sometimes think, well, you've got to sit, and maybe in listening prayer or meditation in order to have an experience of God. You can be walking outside and have that kind of experience of God. So people have those experiences, and oftentimes I think they become afraid, or they may become afraid of a gift that they have. I had someone the other day say, well, I'm having predictive dreams. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I want them. I said, but perhaps that's your gift. Why don't you talk to the spirit about that and find out how you're supposed to use it?
That's interesting, the language that's being used here. When we were in the Pentecostal church, right, Bishop-elect Troy, right?
Very intriguing.
Yes, we didn't call them predictive dreams. You know what I mean? We said that they were prophetic, right? That our dreams were prophetic, and even this notion, this conversation around encounters, like, I guess they would think that us Pentecostals and Apostolics were crazy because we was having encounters with God and the Holy Spirit all the time.
And what would you name that?
I guess when I was coming up, they were prophetic visions, prophetic dreams, prophetic
Trances.
Utterances. Mm-hmm. Yep, trances. Like they use those kinds of words. Anything else, Troy? I mean, I know that just in my upbringing and coming up, I grew up in a Baptist church from a young age, but then I started going to a Pentecostal church. A Pentecostal pastor came from a oneness church and preached revival at our Baptist church, and I got saved in that revival, right? And so all of these terminologies that we're talking about, even now, the words are changed, but it still means the same thing to me.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the images that we would use in the South is that the Holy Ghost fell on you. Like the Spirit came upon you and fell on you. And when that happened, it transcended you from where you were geographically to another place. You traveled in the Spirit, that kind of language. One thing that we're touching on also that I find very intriguing about Dr. Howard Thurman is that he never pits his mysticism against his intellectualism.
No, he doesn't.
And so many believers see it as an either or. Either you can be mystical or you're committed to intellectualism. Be mystical or be an academician. Be mystical or be a theologian, right?
You can't
Be
be
mystical.
both.
You
They
can't be
won't
both.
let you. They won't let you be both.
And that is a denied part because it was always both and with Dr. Thurman. You know, it was,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. But be the kind of mystic that he was, and he broke down different kinds of mystics, right? Being the kind of mystic that he was, he believed that you can operate in, as I'll use the terms, non-duality.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an either or thing. It's both and.
Both and. That's right.
And so all those rules and all those biases, it's like, I don't have time for that. Right? Which is wonderful because basically, as a mystic, he knew better. He didn't need all that, regulations about this, that, or the other. Now, being the intellectual that he was, because he didn't actually have the term mystic until he went and studied with Rufus Jones. I mean, basically, he just thought he was having these experiences of God everywhere, And it wasn't until he read Rufus Jones' book, Finding the Trail of Life, where he describes his childhood, sort of transcendent experiences, that he was like, oh, wow, I need to go study with this man, which he found a way through sacred synchronicities and holy coincidences to study with him. And that's when he realized this was a whole field of theology. Right. And Jones opened up his entire library. And so he studied all the mystics, the intellectual mystics, right? The ones that typically are on the list. I'm trying to make sure that Thurman is on the list, not for Black History Month, not for, people call me up during Black History Month saying, oh, can you come do a retreat on Thurman? Not really. You should be teaching him all the time with the other mystics. He just happened to follow the kind of mystic that he was more of the Quaker, mystic tradition, as opposed to the monastic mystic tradition. Then in the Pentecostal churches you all described, you're not even using those words, but people are having mystical experiences nonetheless,
Absolutely.
according to, how they would name them.
Indeed.
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching, this is Beyond the Gatekeepers, and we are here with Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown. Her new book, What Makes You Come Alive, A Spiritual Walk with Howard Thurman. And when I'm telling you, this is a book you want to get. This is a book you want to journey with. You want to read it. You want to teach it. You want to have Bible study with it. It is powerful like that. And so we encourage you to do that. We're encouraging people who have questions. If you have questions, make sure you write the word question so that we can clearly know that this is something that you want to ask as it relates to what we're talking about. And we're going to, as you gather yourselves and you get your questions together, we have more questions for Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown. And so again, response and ability. Unleash inner authority and sacred activism. Like, I wish that this book I had in seminary at the very beginning, right? The beginning of my journey, when I was going, this is just a great book to help seminarians as well to journey through their time in school.
I think that, my hope is it's a book that gets adopted by spiritual direction training programs, chaplaincy training programs, so that people, and maybe seminaries, I don't know, it might not be intellectual enough for, some seminaries, but I wanted people to understand Thurman's notion of inner authority. And of course, I give the example of my mother, right,
Yes.
who was not allowing somebody to call her a girl in the late, probably 1950s. And just instead of even addressing that, just turned around and walked out the store. But that we all have this, at some point we discover we have agency. We can say yes or no. And I think it's so important to understand that we carry that with us wherever we go, and that sometimes it's important to use it to set boundaries.
Yeah.
But that you have the sense of knowing what's right, what's wrong, whether or not someone is exploiting you, et cetera, and that you can express that and not be afraid.
Yes.
So that part is absolutely vital. But the other part, the inner authority with the capital I and the capital A, means that you can move through life with knowing that you have the Spirit with you to consult all the time, and that you should. So that's how you can be in the world and not be of it, or walk in the world and not be overcome by it. But it requires you to do some self-reflection, to do some examination of your inner life. Like, what's your inner life like? You know, is it turbulent? Is it quiet? Is it peaceful? Most people don't have a peaceful inner life, but some. And who's in control of your inner life? So one of the major phrases from Jesus and the Disinherited is that if someone knows what epithet or insult to hurl at you to throw you off your equilibrium, they will always have you under subjection.
Yeah, they're going to keep pushing that button.
That's right. That's right. So it's time for you, as Professor Mitzi Smith says, to fortify your inward center. You know, and if you have to pray for that, so that you are not getting thrown off. You know, I during the pandemic, I was talking with a woman, and she was so upset about something that had been said on the television, because, you know, 2020 was a wild time. And so she said, I was just ready to throw the television out the window. And I said, well, so who's in control of your inner life? Right? If you are just that upset. So it's, and when it happens, we need to just kind of reflect on that. Why did that person upset me so? And steal my peace and kidnap my joy. So it's real important for us to pay attention to those moments and times when we have given our power away, or when we have allowed someone to take that precious holy center that God gave us. And likewise, that it's important, particularly those who, I basically say that activism of whatever kind becomes sacred when you invite the Spirit in to help you. So think about Martin Luther King Jr. coming about to come across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He stops, he kneels down, and then he gets up and turns everybody around. If that was not an act of utilizing inner authority, I don't know what was. And so sometimes we think we know this is the right thing, or this is the right thing to say, but maybe we don't. So I often, before I'm giving a presentation, or if I'm writing one out, will say to the Spirit, what would you like me to say to these people? I'm getting myself out of the way, like I know what I'm supposed to say to them. Right? So it's that continued interaction. So, and if you do that, and you have cultivated a spiritual life, a regular, consistent spiritual life, then you're not going to get burnt out. But people are getting burned out because there's no spiritual base to what they're doing.
Burned out and burnt up, Dr. Coleman Brown. Burned out and burnt up.
And that's, you know, you can run and not get weary. I mean, that's making that contact, as Thurman would say, with the eternal. Making that contact with the eternal.
Yeah. Listen, I know you all want this book. Please put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. I know you want it. You should get it. You should get it for someone else. You should get it. You should get it. You should get it. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, please. Full circle. Engage in spiritual mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so important.
It is. And, you know, in many African American churches, it occurs informally. There's always a Mother Wilson, or the elder so-and-so, or the deacon so-and-so, or and so I think it's important for us to seek it if we need it. And as we mature spiritually, we need to be mentoring other people.
Yes. I like it.
absolutely essential to pass that wisdom down. Just think if Thurman hadn't written any of this stuff down.
Yeah.
So we, so we can be doing this. I just sort of feel like we could alter the world if people would first follow their guidance. Listen, and then follow the guidance. But if they would see where it is that they can fulfill a need and just
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to go out and, save the whole world. You can just do whatever
Yes.
that is calling you in your own community. So, yes, I think that's absolutely vital.
We do have one question, but before we get to it, I want to touch on that last chapter. Chapter number 10, to live fully, walk the path of liberating spirituality. And you say, well, Howard Thurman says, it is very good to turn aside from the rush and weariness and the anxieties by which these days beset and lay siege to our moments, to rest in the presence of God. It is good to pause to make an end of so much that bothers and harasses the spirit, to assess the meaning of our lives in the light of the movement of the spirit within us. And this is taken from Howard Thurman, The Centering Moment. Can you say more about that tonight?
Well, it takes us back to, once again, the need to recharge.
Yeah.
If we use the analogy again of electric vehicle, it has to be recharged. It has a rechargeable battery. We have a rechargeable battery. But sometimes I wonder just how much time do we give to God? How much time do we give to the Spirit? Is it just on Sunday? Or is it, integrated into our life, maybe even throughout the day, to just pause? How about 5 minutes? Gotta take 5 minutes, right? Where you just sit, you let all that stuff go, just for a few minutes. And what you often find is that when you get up, you've got some more energy. But if you're going, and doing, and talking, it just wears you down. So I think it's absolutely important that we make quiet time with God a regular habit. Sometime during the day that we can just sit without thinking that we have to do anything. We don't. And that may be the beginnings of your discovery of what your spirituality is. For you, it might be being outside. For somebody else, for me, sometimes it's just sewing in my house. Just fabrics and threads and whatever. And sometimes I will do it in the quiet. Sometimes I'll have the television on, but sometimes I just do it in the quiet. So I'm sewing with God. So we have these opportunities to connect.
I like that. I'm sewing with God.
Sewing with God, knitting with God, whatever it is that you do. That fishing is a really amazing contemplative experience. Out there in the wind, just letting the breeze go by. My husband's fly fishes, and he just loves it. So I think that it's not like you have to go change. You have to go someplace, really. There's lots of opportunities in your own home or in your neighborhood or on your own block to connect with God. And we're here in Atlanta. We're slowly moving into spring, and it's just glorious. Just to pause and look at look at life come alive, right? It's been looking dead for the last 4 months or whatever, and just to see how powerful spring is, new life is.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have two questions for you so
Good.
far. So one question is, what is the power of dreams as described by Carl Jung and the power of dreams as prophetic thought in Christianity?
Wow, that's a heavy question.
It's a loaded question.
Yes. Well, Jung was very much into the power of dreams because he felt like if we were relaxed enough that we could that God could speak to us through dreams. And I believe that, we could go a step further, because he also believed that we could choose a topic to dream about. And I've done that. It's like, I'm going to go dream about so and so or something, and get a message about that. So Jung was very spiritual. I don't think a lot of people know that, but he was very spiritual. He may not have said that he was spiritual, but his work was very, very spiritual. So he wasn't just a psychologist.
Thank you for that. I think it's important to note that as well. The next question, Bishop-elect Sonia Williams says, the religion of Jesus says, love your enemies. It may be hazardous, but you must do it. Thurman, that's Howard Thurman said this. How would you say Howard Thurman reconciled white supremacy, Christianity, and equality? What was his balance between love your enemy and resisting systemic whiteness?
Oh, well, again, I'm a sort of person who walks with the tension of both. So he felt like if you took on the attitude of the enemy or the hater, then your soul was going to be poisoned. Because as far as he was concerned, anyone who was hating was drying up their creativity. They were cutting themselves off from God, because he believed in oneness, and love is sort of the oneness, but hate divides. So it's dividing up the oneness. So it's almost as if you are, he called it almost like self-annihilation, in that respect. But notice he often uses the word reconcile, which means, if you look up the origins of that word, it means to come together again, suggesting that something was together before. So he uses that word, but he also felt like it was very important to find a particular thing that you could work with to resist. So, for example, there's a story of him and his congregation in San Francisco. There was a display of some of those black, they used to call them pickaninny dolls, right, in a store window. And so he found it very disturbing. And so what he did was he asked his congregation to just go outside of the store and just stand there and just look at it. So they did that. And of course, the display was down the next day, right? So he found, he was very much a pacifist, but at the same time, during World War II, he wrote to the black soldiers who had, were on the line fighting. So he held this tension between pushing towards some form of reconciliation, but at the same time, supporting people who were trying to work against that. He didn't feel like he was called to the streets, but he felt like he was called to hold the spiritual space for those who did. He supported, for example, Pauline Murray when she was trying to desegregate the restaurants around Howard University, in the 40s. Really counseled a number of people. So he wasn't one of these people. He was sort of trying to bring people together, really as an experiment, and at the same time was not one to back off of taking action, but perhaps nonviolent action.
That was definitely a direct action. Him bringing those folks to the front of the store, that was a direct action, right, against whiteness and white supremacy,
yes,
without him having to say a word.
That's right.
He just brought all those people. That was a direct action. I think that sometimes we think that everything has to be confrontational,
right,
in that way, but it didn't. He never said a word. They never said a word. They stood there, they looked, and then they moved on. By the time the next day came, those people went back and it was gone, right?
Yes.
So I think that there are ways
Yeah, I
to
mean, for
do
some of
things,
us,
right?
yeah, for some of us, it's making a movie. For other people, it might be painting. Or, I have written a number of letters. Sometimes it's just simple a letter or a conversation to
That's it.
say what happened here is just no.
Right.
So, but that's where that inner authority comes in, and that inner knowingness, where now's the time to address this.
Yeah.
And in a way, as a friend of mine says, in a sort of Rosa Parks way, right? Kind but firm.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much for tonight. Very powerful. Again, what makes you come alive? A spiritual walk with Howard Thurman. When I look at just the cover of the book and I think about it, what makes you come alive? It makes me think also that there are a lot of people that are walking around dead,
Oh,
dead
yes.
in, dead inside, right? And he is calling them to, Bishop-elect Troy made mention of it earlier, to an awakening. You know
Yes.
what I mean? It's time to rise from that dead place, whatever it is, and find that thing that you are called to. Thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for the conversation. I want to make sure that I give both you and Bishop-elect Troy some last words that you want to say to our audience tonight before we do our ads.
Okay. Bishop.
Certainly. I just want to echo what Bishop-elect Vanessa said around our thanks, our sincere appreciation for highlighting not only Dr. Thurman, but reminding us around the ways in which we are to return to our true selves and our sincere center. That whole notion, of finding our center and reconnecting with it. I would venture to say that for me, I'll speak for me. It was not my intellectualness that got me through COVID. And what I found was that there had to be a reconnecting and rekindling of my mystical self, that got me through the days where we could not see whether we would die or live, riots in the streets, and all kinds of all the noise that was going on TV. It was an invitation to come home to center and silence. And it was often through Dr. Howard Thurman's work that I found hope and help during a pandemic that still has its tentacles in us,
Yes.
right? And so, thank you for this work, and thank you for this reminder to us, that we do have another part of us, that we can glean from. I hope this continues.
Well, and thank you first for inviting me. I am just delighted that you all were interested in my book and interested in reading it and highlighting it, because I think that, uh, as I said earlier, we have these spiritual resources. Spirit is calling. It's important for us to be aware of and to cultivate our spiritual lives, because that is such an essential part of who we are. And I hope that in this conversation, as well as in people reading this book, that they will find that thing or those things that will spark them. Thurman believed that spirituality could not be taught, but it could be sparked. And I feel as if his spirit has come through me to spark people into working on their spiritual lives and becoming more spiritual, so that we can uh, alter the world from the inside out.
Yes. Simply beautiful. Thank you so much. So outstanding. And we
Thank you.
appreciate your time. We want to encourage everyone. Again, you want to get the book, you want to win it. We're giving away 2 books tonight. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. But very simply, you can just go and support and purchase the book. right? And you can purchase it from Amazon. You can purchase it from so many other places. I know Pastor Sue has been putting them inside the chats in YouTube as well as Facebook Live. All the places you can purchase it. If you don't want to purchase it from Amazon, you can purchase them there. You can go to Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown's website. She has a website.
Yes.
And Dr. Lerita, tell us what the website is.
The website is LeritaColemanBrown.com.
LeritaColemanBrown.com. And it's just dropped. Yes, I see it coming up in the Beyond the Gatekeepers page, Bishop Flunder's page, Kara Solutions page, YouTube. It's all there. LeritaColemanBrown.com. You can get the book from the bookshop, bookshop.org. Okay. Bookshop.org. That's where we want you to get the book from, the bookshop.org.
It will
Thank
tell
you so
your
much.
local bookseller.
Awesome. Very good. And so we want to make sure that we do our ads on tonight, and then we're going to give away 2 books. So we thank you for watching Beyond the Gatekeepers on tonight. Remember, this is current events, books, films through a theological and justice-informed lens. We want you to support our broadcast. You can send a donation to us, if you will, by going to $ Cash App to $ TFAM Annual or PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. Let me say that again. Our Cash App is $ TFAM Annual. Our PayPal is www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. Thank you for your support on tonight. And so we invite you, our presiding bishop would like to invite you to our TFAM Holy Convocation 2023, Miracles, Signs, and Wonders, Atlanta, Georgia, July 5th through the 9th. That's Atlanta, Georgia, July 5th through the 9th. We will be at the Sheraton Atlanta Hotel, and general registration is $150. If it ends May 1st, if you go on up to July 1st is $175. On-site registration is $200. Daily registration is $65. You can go to our website at www.radicallyinclusive.com or .org. Either one, it'll take you to a splash page, and every single thing that you need to know is on that splash page. And you can register, you can book your hotel, you can do it all. You can pay your registration, all of it on that website. Hopefully, we'll see you in Atlanta. And a few of my beloved sisters are doing a webinar, a Lenten webinar. It's called Down in the Valley, where the girls get naked, March 14th through April 4th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Central. It is a $100 course. And what is this book about? Womanist ecclesiologies at the intersection of law, sexuality, and theology. Let me say that again. Womanist ecclesiologies at the intersection of law, sexuality, and theology. We hope that you will join them. You can, they have a registration page. It's through Eventbrite, and you can find it there. All right, we want to give away 2 books on tonight. Make sure you put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. Put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, all one word. If you don't put all one word and you put spaces, it will not register it. Again, $ Beyond the Gatekeepers. I know that you all want to win, so let's make it happen. Oh, the winner is Pastor Erica Smith Maynard. Bless you, Pastor Erica. It's going to be a blessing to you. Do me a favor, go to the Beyond the Gatekeepers page in the inbox, and please put your full name and address so that we can make sure that you get your book. Bless you. One more time. We got one more person. Siegfried Benton. Bless you, brother. We're so glad about it. Please make sure that you do the same. Go to the Beyond the Gatekeepers page. Hit us direct in our direct message. Make sure you put your full name and address. We will make sure that you get the book. Thank you so much for your support on tonight. Thank you for watching Beyond the Gatekeepers. It has been a joy with you, Dr. Lerita Coleman Brown, Bishop-elect Troy. As always, we will see you all on next week by the grace of God. We start a new series on next week with Professor Natasha Robinson. Legal needs are spiritual needs.
Yes.
And so
yes.
we're going to be talking about a few different things. We got some guests coming on as well. We are looking forward to it. We say God bless you and have a wonderful evening.